having romance with the audience, and this is something that's completely different, and it's much harder than doing stand-up, which I'm used to.
Rodney Dangerfield made millions laugh by playing the man nobody respected. The shaky voice, the red tie, the nervous smile, it all became part of the act. But away from the stage, Rodney's life was heavier than his jokes. He grew up feeling unwanted, fought for years to make it in comedy, quit when fame did not come, then came back older and turned pain into gold. He married, divorced, loved, lost, and spent his final years with a woman who brought calm to a life that was never easy. Fans knew the punchlines, but not the lonely man behind them. At 81, his story felt less like comedy and more like confession. Join us as we look back at Rodney's rise, heartbreaks, loves, and final years. The boy who got no love. Rodney Dangerfield was born Jacob Cohen on November 22, 1921, in Babylon, Long Island, New York. Before the red tie, the wide eyes, and the famous line about getting no respect, he was a lonely Jewish boy growing up in a house that did not feel safe or warm. His mother was Dorothy Dottie Teitelbaum, who was born in Hungary. His father was Philip Cohen, a vaudeville performer who used the stage name Phil Roy. That sounds almost fitting, because show business was around Rodney from the start. But the romance of it ended fast. His father was rarely home. Rodney usually saw him only twice a year. Later in life, Philip asked his son for forgiveness, and Rodney gave it. But forgiveness did not erase the years that shaped him. His mother was said to be cold and emotionally distant. She did not show him the affection a child needs. Rodney later said, "My mother never hugged me, kissed me, nothing, okay?" While other kids heard bedtime stories, he said he went to sleep listening to fights downstairs. The pain got even darker. In a 2004 interview with Howard Stern, Rodney said a man in his neighborhood molested him when he was a child, paying him a nickel and kissing him for several minutes. Rodney later joked bitterly about it, but the story was not funny. It showed how unsupervised and unprotected he had been. After his father left, his mother moved Rodney and his sister to Kew Gardens, Queens. He attended Richmond Hill High School and graduated in 1939. As a child, he worked to help the family. He delivered groceries, sold newspapers, sold ice cream at the beach, and even drove a fish truck. He also faced anti-Semitism from classmates and teachers. So when Rodney built a whole career around the words, "I don't get no respect," it was not just a joke. It sounded funny because it came from somewhere real. Long before America laughed with him, Rodney had already learned how it felt to be invisible. Jack Roy's first shot at fame. That rough childhood pushed Rodney toward comedy early. His father had been a performer, and even though he was mostly absent, Rodney still followed the same strange road. At just 15, he started writing jokes for stand-up comedians. He also performed at the Nevele, a former resort in Ellenville, New York. He was still a teenager, but he was already learning how a joke worked. He learned timing. He learned rhythm. He learned that a short line could hide a lot of pain. At 19, he legally changed his name to Jack Roy. That was his first attempt to become somebody else. But the new name did not bring quick success. For 9 long years, he struggled to make comedy pay. At one point, he worked as a singing waiter before getting fired. He was bringing in money at times, but it was never enough to build a secure life. He later said show business had treated him so badly that when he quit, "I was the only one who knew I quit." That line sounds like classic Rodney, but it also tells the truth. He had chased a dream, and barely anyone noticed when he walked away. By the early 1950s, he was tired of travel, pressure, and failure. He married singer Joyce Indig, and both of them gave up their show business hopes for a more normal life. Rodney became an aluminum siding and paint salesman to support his wife and family. It was steady, but it was not his calling. He had left the stage, but he never fully stopped thinking like a comedian. He kept writing jokes. He kept sharpening lines. He kept carrying that hunger, even when he looked like an ordinary salesman. And that is where his story becomes interesting. Rodney did not become famous young. He did not get the easy road. He disappeared from comedy before most people had even learned his name. But before that mask could save him, Rodney first tried to build the home he never had. Marriage, money, and missed dreams. Rodney was looking for more than a career when he married Joyce Indig. He was looking for love, stability, and the normal family life he never had as a child. Joyce was a singer, and she also stepped away from her own career dreams after the marriage. They married on October 3, 1951. On paper, it looked like a new chapter, but real life was not that simple. Rodney later described the marriage as a real mixed-up affair. He was trying to be a husband and provider while still feeling the pull of comedy. Money was tight. The old dream kept calling. The pressure inside the home grew. Rodney became a father later than many men, with his son Brian born in 1960. His daughter, Melanie Roy Friedman, was born after he and Joyce married again. Their relationship broke apart more than once. They divorced in 1961, remarried in 1963, and divorced again in 1970. Even during the marriage, Rodney lived largely separated from his family at times. The pattern showed how badly he wanted a home, but also how hard it was for him to hold one together. Their second divorce in 1970 closed one long and difficult chapter. Rodney had tried to build the kind of home he never had as a child. But love, money, pressure, and ambition kept pulling everything apart. The marriage showed something important about him. He wanted family. He wanted peace. But he was also restless, wounded, and still chasing the life he believed he had missed. Even before that final break, the stage had already begun calling him back louder than ever. The moment Rodney found himself. By the early 1960s, Rodney knew he could not stay away forever. He was working as a salesman by day, but at night he began returning to the stage. He performed in hotels in the Catskill Mountains, still using what was left of his old dream. Success did not come right away. He fell into debt, about $20,000 by his own estimate, and still could not get booked. He joked, "I played one club. It was so far out. My act was reviewed in Field and Stream." But failure finally taught him the one thing he had missed before. He needed an image. He needed a clear character people could understand in seconds. He looked at his life, his childhood, his marriage trouble, his money problems, and his years of being overlooked. Then he built a man on stage for whom nothing ever went right. That man was unhappy, nervous, middle-aged, and always insulted. Everyone could understand him, because everyone has felt small at some point. During this comeback, he was scheduled to play the Inwood Lounge in Manhattan. He wanted to hide from longtime customers who might remember him from the 1940s, so he asked club owner George McFadden to change his name. McFadden came up with Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney later said, "I don't know where it came from." The name may have come from earlier radio and television uses, including the Jack Benny program and The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. But once he took it, the name became his forever. The new Rodney trimmed his jokes until almost nothing was left but setup and punchline. He once worked for months on only a few minutes of material. Then, in the 1960s, the door finally opened. He landed an audition for The Ed Sullivan Show and delivered. In March 1967, he reached national attention on that stage. After years of silence, America finally heard him. This time, Rodney Dangerfield was not disappearing. The red tie takes over TV. Once Rodney reached The Ed Sullivan Show, his career changed fast. He became a regular face on television. He kept appearing on Ed Sullivan, started headlining in Las Vegas, and became a regular on The Dean Martin Show. He also appeared on The Tonight Show more than 70 times. Viewers knew the look right away. The red tie, the nervous pull at his collar, the sweaty energy, the voice that sounded like life had already beaten him before he reached the microphone. His jokes were short, sharp, and easy to repeat. His signature line, "I don't get no respect," became more than a catchphrase. It became a whole identity. In 1976, that line was even adopted for the animated show Jabberjaw, showing how deep it had moved into pop culture. But Rodney was not only thinking about his own stage time. In 1969, he teamed with Anthony Bevacqua to open Dangerfield's Comedy Club in New York City. He borrowed $250,000 to make it happen. Part of the reason was practical. He wanted a place where he could perform regularly without always traveling away from his family. But the club became much bigger than that. It turned into a home for young comics who needed a real chance. Dangerfields later hosted HBO specials that helped names like Jerry Seinfeld, Jim Carrey, Tim Allen, Roseanne Barr, Robert Townsend, Jeff Foxworthy, Sam Kinison, Bill Hicks, Rita Rudner, Andrew Dice Clay, Louis Anderson, Dom Irrera, and Bob Saget reach wider audiences. The club was so successful that Rodney paid back investors in about a year and a half. In 1978, Harvard invited him to be the Class Day speaker, a strange and perfect honor for a man who built his act on being disrespected. The Harvard Crimson even described one of his shows before the event. The kid who had sold ice cream and newspapers was now speaking to Harvard seniors. But Rodney was still not at his peak. Television made him famous, but Hollywood was about to make him impossible to ignore. When Caddyshack changed everything. By the late 1970s, Rodney had done what once seemed impossible. He was a star, but not yet a movie superstar. The next push came through primetime exposure and commercials. In 1977, he appeared in ensemble Miller Lite beer ads with athletes and celebrities. These commercials let him use the same no respect style in quick bursts. One famous bowling ad had the score tied. Ben Davidson told him, "All we need is one pin, Rodney." Rodney's ball went down the lane, bounced off the head pin, and landed in the gutter without knocking anything down. It was the perfect Rodney moment. Even when success surrounded him, the joke was that life still refused to help. Then came Caddyshack in 1980. Rodney played Al Chervik, a loud, rich property developer who stormed into a stiff country club and clashed with Judge Elihu Smales, played by Ted Knight. His role was supposed to be smaller, but he, Chevy Chase, and Bill Murray were so good at improvising that their parts grew during filming. Some castmates were not thrilled, but early reviews praised Rodney as a standout. Caddyshack changed everything. It led to Easy Money and then Back to School, where he also served as co-writer. His movie characters were different from his stand-up loser image. On screen, he was often rich, confident, loud, and popular, while the wealthy elite still looked down on him. That twist worked. He was still the outsider, but now he had money, guts, and volume. Back to School became a massive hit and helped make him a superstar at 65. The man who had once quit because nobody noticed him was now everywhere. He even appeared at the end of Billy Joel's Tell Her About It video and Lionel Richie's Dancing on the Ceiling. Rodney had crossed into pop culture, but his strangest move was still waiting around the corner. Rodney's weirdest career turn. Rodney's strangest career move came in the early 1980s, when he stepped into rap. In 1983, he released Rappin' Rodney. Today, it sounds like a novelty, but at that time, rap was still fighting for mainstream space. The single reached number 83 on the Billboard Hot 100 and spent 8 weeks on the chart. The video became an early MTV hit. It showed Rodney in a dream sequence where he is condemned to die and still gets no respect, not even in heaven, as the gates close before he can enter. Don Novello appeared as a last rites priest, eating Rodney's fast food, and Pat Benatar appeared as a masked executioner. The song earned him another Grammy nomination for Best Comedy Recording, after his 1980 album No Respect had already won a Grammy. Once again, Rodney understood the power of a new medium. He had used television. He had used comedy albums. Now he was using MTV. He also kept stretching himself in other ways. In 1990, he was involved in Where's Rodney?, an unsold NBC pilot about a teenager who could summon him for life advice. Later, he made a darker turn in Natural Born Killers, playing an abusive father and writing or rewriting all of his own lines for the scene. In 1995, the Motion Picture Academy rejected him for membership through the actors section. Fans protested. The Academy reconsidered, but Rodney refused to accept membership after that. The same year, he became the first celebrity to personally own a website and create content for it. Through an Email Me link, he answered fans and shocked them with real replies. By 1996, his site was named among the 100 most influential people on the web by Website magazine. He also played Larry Burns on The Simpsons, appeared on Home Improvement, and later played Lucifer in Adam Sandler's Little Nicky. The Smithsonian even displayed one of his white shirts and red ties. Rodney joked, "I have a feeling you're going to use this to clean Lindbergh's plane." But behind that sharp humor, the old hurt was still alive. Fame did not fix the hurt. For all the fame, Rodney never fully escaped the sadness that followed him. After Joyce passed away in 1975, his private life carried a new weight. Around 1980, People magazine found him living in a Manhattan Upper East Side apartment with his children, a housekeeper, his poodle Kino, and his closest friend of 30 years, Joe Ansis. Joe was another aluminum siding salesman, and Rodney called him the funniest man in the world. It was not the wildlife people might expect from a star. It was private, unusual, and deeply human. His stage jokes about his mother and miserable childhood were not just made-up lines. They came from real wounds. In private, Rodney struggled with depression for much of his life and was diagnosed with clinical depression late in life. He had wild mood swings and sometimes stayed in bed all day under the covers. In his autobiography, It's Not Easy Bein' Me, he said the worst depression came in his 70s. He wrote, "It was a bad one. For 2 years, I couldn't function." As his health declined, Rodney took more and more medicine, sometimes more than 100 pills a day. He also self-medicated with alcohol and marijuana. He smoked marijuana for decades and even wanted to call his book My Love Affair with Marijuana. He was also a heavy smoker for much of his life, once walking around with 3 different packs of cigarettes. He tried to quit, but sometimes rewarded himself for not smoking by smoking again. Joan later described his anxiety and manic depression, but she also saw his softer side. She said he was classy, gentlemanly, sensitive, and intelligent. She also said he had a fantastically unique mind and that few people knew he was a mathematical genius. Rodney hated being confused with the loser he played on stage. The public saw the comic. Joan saw the wounded man behind the act. That made her place in his life very different. The woman who changed his final years. After Joyce, Rodney remained single for many years. Then, in 1983, he walked into a flower shop in Santa Monica, California. The shop belonged to Joan Child. Rodney was in town while working on a fitness program, and he noticed her. Joan already recognized him from television, so seeing him in person was a surprise. But their first connection was not loud or dramatic. It was simple. He came into the shop. He made conversation. He used humor the way only he could. Over time, he started visiting more often. What began as casual talk slowly became something deeper. Joan was not trying to become famous. She was a businesswoman, a floral designer, and a private person who valued a simple life. That mattered. Rodney had spent decades around clubs, cameras, applause, and pressure. Joan brought calm into that world. Their age difference was clear. When they married in 1993, Joan was 41 and Rodney was 72. But the relationship had already lasted for a decade before they made it official. Their bond seemed to be built less on glamour and more on understanding. Joan gave him steadiness. Rodney gave her warmth and laughter. Around the time he promoted his 2000 film, My 5 Wives, the couple even staged a recommitment ceremony to show their devotion again. By then, Rodney had known marriage, divorce, loneliness, fame, and public laughter. But Joan became the woman tied most closely to his final chapter. She stood beside him when his health grew fragile. She understood the pressure behind the jokes, and she protected the private man the public never fully knew. For a comedian who kept saying he got no respect, her loyalty meant something heavy. It was not just romance, it was peace after a long, rough road. In a life full of noise, Joan gave him something quieter. She gave him patience, order, care, shelter, and steady loyalty when he needed it most. But as Rodney entered his 80s, even Joan's steady love could not hold back what his body faced next. One more joke before surgery. Rodney's later years were filled with love, work, and serious health problems. He was never known as a health nut. Years of heavy smoking, poor diet, little exercise, depression, and medicine had taken a toll. On November 22, 2001, his 80th birthday, he suffered a mild stroke while performing stand-up on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Leno noticed something was wrong with Rodney's movements and asked a producer to call paramedics. Even in the hospital, Rodney was still Rodney. Staff were reportedly upset because he smoked marijuana in his room. A year later, he returned to The Tonight Show and performed on his 81st birthday. At 81, the old jokes were still there, but life had become more fragile. He had already lived through broken family ties, 2 divorces from the same woman, depression, fame, and a late love with Joan. By then, the woman beside him was not just part of the story. She was part of his survival. In 2003, doctors needed to prepare him for heart valve replacement surgery. But first, they worried about blood flow. On April 8, 2003, he underwent brain surgery to improve it. He came through that operation. Then, on August 24, 2004, he went to UCLA Medical Center for heart surgery. When someone asked how long he would be in the hospital, he gave one more classic line. If all goes well, about a week. If not, about an hour and a half. The surgery was dangerous, and after it, things became worse. He suffered a stroke and slipped into a coma. Joan later helped bring him back to consciousness by asking if he wanted to see an X-rated cartoon he found hilarious. Somehow, that reached him. But the recovery did not last. The man who had survived humiliation, failure, and reinvention was now nearing his final punchline. The punchline on his grave. Rodney Dangerfield died on October 5, 2004. He was 82 years old. He was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. Even the day of his death carried one last eerie joke. The randomly selected joke of the day on his official website happened to be, "I tell ya, I get no respect from anyone. I bought a cemetery plot." The guy said, "There goes the neighborhood." Joan chose "There goes the neighborhood" as the epitaph on his headstone, and it became one of the most famous parts of his afterlife. His widow later held a memorial event where the word "respect" was written in the sky. Guests were also given live monarch butterflies for a butterfly release ceremony led by Farrah Fawcett. It was a tender send-off for a man who had spent his life turning disrespect into comedy. The tributes kept coming. UCLA's Division of Neurosurgery named a suite of operating rooms after him and created the Rodney Respect Award. Joan presented it to Jay Leno on October 20, 2005, at UCLA's 2005 Visionary Ball. Later recipients included Tim Allen, Jim Carrey, Louis Anderson, Bob Saget, Chelsea Handler, Chuck Lorre, Kelsey Grammer, Brad Garrett, John Lovitz, Jamie Masada, Jimmy Fallon, Whitney Cummings, and Ken Jeong. Saturday Night Live honored him with a short sketch where Darrell Hammond played Rodney at Heaven's Gates. St. Peter says he only wanted to hear those jokes one more time, then lets him in. Rodney answers, "Finally, a little respect." George Lopez also dedicated an episode to him in October 2004. In 2006, Comedy Central's Legends, Rodney Dangerfield honored him with comedians such as Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, Jay Leno, Ray Romano, Roseanne Barr, Jerry Seinfeld, Bob Saget, Jerry Stiller, Kevin Kline, and Jeff Foxworthy. The man who joked that nobody respected him was suddenly being honored everywhere. But after his death, another fight began. Who would control the Rodney the world remembered? Joan fights for Rodney's legacy. After Rodney died, Joan became the person most connected to his estate and intellectual property. She did not fade completely from the story, because protecting his work became part of her life. In 2006, she sued Rodney's daughter, Melanie Roy Friedman, over footage from a 1988 Las Vegas act. Melanie had filmed her father after he allowed it, even though Rodney guarded his act carefully. According to the lawsuit, Melanie gave him a copy but not the master recording, later calling it her personal property. Joan said the footage was used without permission for the Comedy Central special Legends, Rodney Dangerfield. The lawsuit was settled in 2008, and the terms stayed confidential. Her attorney said all copyrights to Rodney's act were held by Joan, who owned his intellectual property. In 2007, Joan also sued producer David Permit, a former friend, to stop the use of more than 200 hours of video recorded during Rodney's later years. She said much of it was extremely sensitive and personal, showing Rodney in poor health and was never meant for public viewing. The planned documentary was called Respect. In 2018, Joan filed another lawsuit, this time claiming she had been swindled out of $3.9 million in a hologram company called Rock Dome. She said she believed the company represented the future of live performance. The case alleged fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and negligent misrepresentation, though her attorney later said all matters had been resolved amicably. These legal fights may sound far from romance, but they show something important. Joan did not just love Rodney in private. After his death, she guarded his image, his work, and the vulnerable final years he might not have wanted exposed. Still, even years later, the fight for Rodney's respect was not completely over. Rodney's respect came too late. Rodney's name kept living on in strange, funny, and sometimes difficult ways. In 2009, Jay Leno credited him with helping popularize the joke style, where a comedian says how bad something is, and the sidekick asks, "How bad is it?" That small setup became part of comedy history. Joan also helped keep his memory alive. In 2013, she relaunched his official website on what would have been his 92nd birthday. The site later earned Webby Award nominations and even one win. The honors kept coming. In 2014, Manhattanville College gave him an honorary doctorate, making him Dr. Dangerfield. In 2017, Los Angeles City College Theater Academy hosted the first class of the Rodney Dangerfield Institute of Comedy. That same year, Kew Gardens placed a plaque in his old Queens neighborhood. But even there, respect was not simple. Some people wanted a street near his old home named Rodney Dangerfield Way. Others pushed back, saying the mural in the park was enough. In 2020, Eddie Murphy told W Magazine that Rodney once gave him the worst career advice he ever got. Rodney warned him about his language and racial material. Years later, after Eddie became a star, Rodney saw him in a Las Vegas bathroom and simply said, "Hey, who knew?" Dangerfield's club closed in 2020, then reopened in January 2024 as Rodney's Comedy Club. As of 2026, Joan Child remains private and low profile. She has not publicly remarried, and she remains closely tied to the man whose final chapter she helped protect. So, after everything Rodney lived through, do you think he finally got the respect he spent his whole life joking about? And was Joan the love story that gave his final years the peace fame never could? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.